But at any rate, as fans of the show know, we usually theme drinks after the books that the authors have written. So, Robert, what did you bring to drink today?
Well, yeah, I've actually been obsessing about this a little bit because I really love dreaming up cocktails and haven't had a lot of chance to do it yet. So when you let me know that we were going to try to do something that had some pertinence to the series, which is called the Fire Sacraments, I immediately started Googling flaming drinks. And I do indeed have a flaming drink, which I have invented. So I'm calling Tears of the Gods. And if
Nice.
you've had a chance to look at Sidewinders, you know that is a reference. And I really don't want to burn down my beloved study or even char my desk. So I did it's a two-step fire process here. You first, here's the drink anyway. And you can see it's got things floating in it. That's star anise. And the first bit of pyromania involves soaking those in some flammable overproof liquor and setting them alight just long enough to char. And then you put the glass over it and snuff the fire and hopefully catch some of the smoky essence of it inside the cup.
Are you going to do that for us? Or are you going to light us a little fire?
Well, I did that part, but then there's a second pyromania part, which I'm going to try to do right now, which is, I don't know if you can see here, but I clipped a bit of rosemary from my garden, and I've been soaking that in some really, really nice smoky single malt spay.
Wow.
And it should light. In an earlier experiment today, it did, but you know, alcohol tends to evaporate. So what I'm going to do is, I'll put this in front of the camera here, but the idea, and this is I'm riffing on mixologists.
And in the world of the Fire Sacraments, where would they usually drink this, or what context? Would it be like a pyromancer who's like performing in front of the prophet, or?
This wouldn't have a chance to occur in the world of the Fire Sacraments. It's simply a fiery drink, but it is. I have sage and rosemary, which are two, if not deserts, certainly arid land plants, giving this flavor, and star anise, which is a tropical plant. And we're going to see if there's enough alcohol here for this to light. Might have to add a little bit more scotch, if not. Anise chard. All right, it's doing something. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I don't know if you can see the flames, but they're very small.
A little higher up.
Cute. Yeah, it's.
Oh yeah, a little bit.
So there's just
possibly bring it like an inch or two higher.
Okay. They're really, really, really invisible. I'm looking at them myself, and I can barely tell they're there, but I can feel the heat coming off.
I'll take your word for it. No, we can't do that. We can't do that at the bar I work at anymore because we almost burned the place down. So.
Oh really?
Oh yeah. Like we have to do all those fancy flame drinks, but yeah, we don't want to be firebugs either. So yeah, that's a splendid drink.
Really damn good. And what are you drinking?
Well, I wanted to make a drink that was in context for the world, and it seemed like the font of Luke Reese. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
It's for readers who are unfamiliar with the work. It's like kind of the oasis city, kind of like the remnant of a major city. It used to be like the aristocratic district, and now the city is kind of retracted into itself, and now it's like a caravanserai for travelers just hang out and stuff. It's kind of like a little like the jewel in the desert. So I figured I'd make a fancy drink. It's kind of like Sex on the Beach, but it's vodka, peach schnapps. I know vodka's kind of, vodka, peach schnapps, and orange juice, of course. So cheers to that.
Nice.
Oh, and it's
nice.
called,
That's so appropriate. That's the sort of thing I can, I don't know. They'd probably have palm wine, like super high proof palm wine rather than vodka there, but they would definitely have the tropical fruits. Absolutely,
right.
Yeah.
So for people who are unfamiliar with your work, I would mostly link it to like Shattered Sands, but of course your work is very much different from Shattered Sands. So can you explain to newcomers how it might relate to the current fantasy canon of desert style fantasy?
Wow, I wish I could, Bradley is a really great guy, but I'm way, way behind on that series. So it's going to be hard for me to say. I mean, I don't really feel qualified to compare to things, but especially contemporary. And I'll tell you, this has been sort of a thorn in my side for a while, but my reading life has taken a hit because I'm writing all the time under deadline. And so there's so much contemporary fantasy, really great stuff too, that I haven't read. And the truth is too, that I, you know, when I'm going down a certain path, just concern about influence tends to make me wait a while before I sample it. So, you know, my previous series was a nautical epic fantasy series, the Chathran Voyage Quartet.
What's it called?
And I didn't let myself read nautical fantasy, and I didn't read Robin Hobb or Naomi Novik while I was working on that, because I just I didn't want to, you know, at the end of the day be thinking, you know, what would Naomi have done, you know, and
Right.
And you know, I read a lot of nautical stuff that was much further afield, because I had to educate myself on it, as I did with the desert. But I didn't read fantasy per se. And in this case, you know, although there's wonderful desert fantasy out there from Dune on forward, or, you know, science fantasy, I'm looking forward, when I'm finished with this and I've let it rest a little while, that's when I'll go back and say, hey, what did I do, you know, compared to what Bradley did? What I do compared to, say, what Pete Brett did, you know?
Right.
And now there are a few writers who set their work in arid lands, but who are so different from me. You know, they're not writing epic, for example. You know, Sophia Samatar is one who comes to mind, whose work is just, you know, she's a stylistic genius, and she's you know, just a master of the short form. And she sets some of her work in specific or suggested, like, East African settings and so on.
Right.
And
It's actually that actually kind of astonishes me, because your prose is just some of the best prose I've ever like read, and that's not even me like tooting your horn. Like, you can tell, like, the concrete imagery that you slip in, the world building, stuff like that. It's just amazing to me. So good for you, man. You can tell that you put a lot of effort into your writing. Like, it shows. It definitely does. So yeah.
Thank you very, very much for saying that. I do care about language a lot. Yeah, I really, you know, I think it slows me down some as a writer, because I just have a sense for when it's when I'm getting the music close to right and when I'm not, and when I'm not, I just, you know, some internal break just comes down hard. Music just isn't there. I can give you a kind of a concrete example, because I'm having so much fun with it now. There's a character in, well, in the first two books, her name is Talupeke, and she's a child soldier. She's been through real hell. I mean, she's only like going on 17 as this third book starts. You know, she has a sort of a self-loathing issue in part, and also, you know, that bubbles over into readiness to tear everybody else into an asshole too at the drop of the hat. And but she's a character I really care about and enjoy writing a lot. And she didn't have quite as much in the final cut, so to speak. She didn't have quite as much time on the page as I would have liked in book 2. She had more in book 1. And so, you know, I knew that as soon as I got going on book 3, this is the last book in the trilogy now, it's called Siege, that I'm working on.
Do you have a name?
That I wanted her to, sorry?
Did you give the title name for that, or?
Yeah, the title is Siege, yeah.
Oh, okay, Siege.
Yeah.
Okay,
because it's that's a pretty big plot clue right there. That all the plot vectors of the first two books are converging on the city, and yes, indeed, it is going to be hopefully a siege tale to end all siege tales.
Right. And this relates to I can never pronounce her name, but
Talupeke.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, just to say, in book 3 there, I knew that I wanted to start out with Talupeke on the page pretty early, and so I decided to try writing a little bit in her voice, first person, And to make that, you know, I thought, what? You know, how is that going to actually make any sense, given, you know, everything's been in third person? And I thought about it, and I realized it would be a really incredible thing to take Talupeke, who's like the least likely person to keep a journal in the world,
and stop
because she doesn't think of herself as smart. Yeah, she has this self, you know, worthlessness issue, and she doesn't think she's smart, but she really is.
Yeah.
She's her education has basically been a few tutors in the family circus. She literally comes from a family of circus performers.
The Carnies, yeah.
Yeah. But she sort of strikes a deal with her grandmother. Her grandmother is on her deathbed, and not to give too much away, but the grandmother says, you know, I'll keep fighting to live every day you write in that journal. And Talupeke is pissed because she knows she's been blackmailed by the only person who could really blackmail her, the only person that she respects enough.
I really enjoyed
But as soon as I started writing in her voice, it was really fun. You know, this person who's just crude, but has a lot to say. It was really, really fun.
Especially with that character. It's a very, very layered character. And I love how you expanded into different point of views in this latest book, because readers who are unfamiliar, the first book follows one third person point of view. And then the second book splits off into various regions of the world, and it really knits together the overarching plot line. I think that was a really bold move, but you played it off very well. So yeah, and I figure that the siege will be no different in that regard. So
yeah, it's going to be a challenge, you know, as I write this one, to just contain all the threads I'd like to explore, because the story is going to end in this book. I mean, there's just no question about that.
Right.
And it'll be you know, Sidewinders here is no slim volume. It's, you know, what is 652 pages.
And how many times does Mech 2 hide his face and his elbow?
Oh gosh, I never counted.
God. That was just so brilliant. Yeah.
You know, sometime I really wish I could do cartoons, because I have this sort of a fantasy of doing an animation of what it was like to write the first book, Master Assassins, and particularly what people were saying about Mech 2, because I mean, I didn't see Mech 2 coming. I mean, for people who haven't read the stuff, I mean, he's a jerk. That's putting it
wild card.
Yeah, he's a real wild card. He's a loose cannon, and he's also sort of a case of Arrested Development. You know, I think, like, if there's any way to forgive him for the way he is, it's that he's 24 in body, and he's like going on 4.5 in a lot of his emotional maturity.
Right.
And you know, even the people who love him just want to throttle him a lot of the times, and they wonder why he hasn't been killed yet. And sort of something I guess I tried to work into the page. But you know, when first readers, beta readers, including my agent, saw sections with Mech 2, they were like, Robert, no. You remember that point, like in the film version of the Lord of the Rings, where Sam is trying to convince Frodo not to let Gollum go with him. He's like,
that's like the second movie, right?
No. Yeah. And he's like, he gets really quiet and serious. It's like, no. And that's what people were saying to me about Mech 2. They're like, this guy is such a jerk. You know, people are going to just be too angry, you know, with what he does. And yet, you know, I'm angry.
He's a fan favorite, honestly. Like he's definitely strikes a chord that differs from most of the tone, and it's kind of like a breath of fresh air when we're getting like too weighed down with the drama, Mech 2, or he just throws a wrench in everything when things get too easy. So it's a great character.
He's a bomb thrower for sure. But he's like far and away the most popular character in terms of, you know, people writing to me, and a lot of it is like, you know, he reminds me of my brother who I haven't talked to in 14 years. How dare you, and stuff like that. But, you know, it's still, even that kind of makes me happy in a way, because it's clearly, you know, he touches some kind of a nerve.
I really love the comparison between like Mech 2 and Condry, where it's like They look like two different paintings of the same man. One is just like a very specific to detail. The other is like a crazy kind of wacky artist who's just trying to do like a caricature. I love that. It really captured both of the characters in a very concrete manner. So
Also, I'm really falling in love with the city of Casrales,
me too.
where the series concludes. Thank you. And yet Casrales too has had all these different incarnations. It's been it had 1,000 years of pre-imperial history. Then it became the seat of a empire that dominated the entire continent, and then it lost that empire. And basically, sort of like the Vatican after the Roman Empire, the whole empire shrank down to this one city, which is the only part of it that's never been conquered, and it just has carried on for a few centuries since then. And it's actually, with this loss of all its power, or 70–80% of its power in the world, it's almost a better place and a happier place in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And that, so but it's got this doom hanging over it as we move into this story, because the sins it has committed have not been forgotten by the people it colonized, and some of them are getting very, very strong and have some scores to settle. So it might be like, I might love to have been like in the Casrales of 20 years before this series, when things were looking great.
Yeah.
The whole huge burden of being the big bad empire was long gone, and it was just a great place to live.
Didn't
And,
they have to
the
fear
clouds on the horizon were still far away. Yeah.
Wouldn't they have to fear the general of the shoal though? Was he not like on the rise at that time?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear that.
The general of the, I don't know how to pronounce the shoal. I think it's like his name is something like the dragon. Wouldn't he have been on like the rise at the time? Would he have been rising as a threat to them? Possibly.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and they've clashed a lot, but in those early, the two largest powers really in Uras, this continent, are Casrales, which is still, it's more than just a city really. It's still a city state, and although the lands that it controls are quite small, the wealth it controls is still immense. So it's a great power still. It's just not in charge of the continent. And then there's a much larger country in terms of territory, and even in terms of military might, arguably, that was the largest colony within the old empire, and that's the Scarlet Kingdom, Sholopor. The people are called the Shol, and they've gone to war 11 times in the post-imperial period, and so there've been 11 sieges of the city before, and none of them have really come that close. And by the time that you've tried 11 times to take the city, it's becoming a bit of a joke. And therein lies the danger, right? That the complacency that kicks in when you've just proven yourself invincible. It begins to seem like the decree of the gods. Like there's nothing to worry about, nothing can ever change. And it's
your city's
only a few people. Yeah, only a few people who can see, beyond that complacency and see the real.
And you convey a lot of that like civic hubris through your point of view character that you have within the city of Casrales. We get a lot of that, like that one quote. It's like, public latrines have served this city longer than your clan, or stuff like that. And you also, yeah.
There's a lot of prejudice against her,
right?
Which is part of the reason. Yeah, this is Lady Kasuda we're talking about, is the young chancellor of Casrales, and kind of maybe a bit of a Cassandra character, and that nobody's listening to her, but and it's partially because of that prejudice that nobody's listening to her. But she is, in addition to the chancellor, she is the head of the more secret than, like, I guess you could compare it to what's the more, so we have the CIA that everybody knows about, but for decades nobody knew about the other one.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about.
And this is called the Inspectorate or something along the lines?
Yeah, it's the Inspectorate, right. The Chancellor's Inspectorate is the more secret service than the official secret service.
Right.
And it's very small, it doesn't have much money. but it has the great advantage that almost no one knows it exists.
And her dialogue is so appropriate for that character. For example, when someone has to repeat a question, she's like, "Am I speaking in code? Like a spy's code?" And I thought that was very like appropriate for the character. So it just goes to show again that you put a lot of effort into every line, it seems. So good for you.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. And
for people who are unfamiliar with the term, Orientalism was a concept developed by Edward Said to address how the West conceives Eastern culture, kind of use it as a monolithic entity and transposes, you know, like sexual desires or, you know, just taboo elements into other cultures that aren't our own. Yeah, so fantasy actually is kind of guilty of this for a lot, for the most part. Not for the most part, but fantasy is pretty guilty of Orientalizing at times, styling a culture over a monolith. But I will say that the Fire Sacraments differs in this regard. Like every culture is very different, like vastly so. It's not like, it doesn't feel like you're just like consolidating them all into this one other, so to speak, quote unquote other. So while you were writing the series, did you ever have that in the back of your head, trying to make sure that you don't Orientalize?
yeah, very, very much so, very much so. I mean, I think we all really owe Said a lot for giving us a term that's so useful in thinking about that. But yeah, I do. And, you know, part of how I come about that, I mean, first and above all, I think what I try to hold on to is humility in my project. And, you know, I begin there with the humility of how little I really know about the world, about so many cultures. You know, I've been lucky enough to travel a lot and to work abroad and live abroad. And that's only just brought home to me the very, very little that I know. And, you know, learning a bit by being somewhere doesn't make you a voice of authority about that place. Maybe if you live there 50 years, maybe. And if you're not, you know, blinded by hubris, even then. But because I knew that, you know, I wasn't, well, it's hard to back this up enough to really answer the question in a way, but I had it easy in a sense because I'm writing about secondary worlds. I didn't have to face the first hurdle was sort of taken away, which was, you know, how are you going to represent the Near East, or how are you going to represent Southeast Asia? Well, I'm not, because I'm writing in a secondary world and they're not there. You know, the next temptation is often, well, are you just going to transpose some model, you know, of some portion overtly or less than overtly, you know, implicitly, and you know, make this a story of a faux China or a pseudo China? No, I didn't want to do that either. But it's very, very easy to start just defaulting into a sort of a palette of tropes.
Yeah.
That, you know, grow up, read, you know, some abridged version of the Arabian Nights, and you've got this head full of tropes you could trot out. No, it's fun. You know, you may have an idea, this guy's just a villain, and I think I know his motives. And then you discover another whole underlayer of motives that makes it all more rich. And then so a whole history can be revealed by that.
Yeah. All right, that's splendid. Thank you so much for answering that. What else? I think that we are just about done. So thank you so much for coming by. I really do appreciate it.